members, friends, fans, and family. Oh, I'm getting some deja vu right now. Welcome to episode 19 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. Joining 1, 2, 3. 19. Ooh, we're getting up there in episodes, you guys. I'm really impressed. I'm very excited. The topic of today's episode, we are each going to be talking about our first shows that we ever did. We're very, very excited about that. Joining us today, our regular panelists, Miss Katie and Miss Molly. Hello, ladies. Thanks for joining us. And we have two special guests this week. Live from New York, we have Paul Regano. Paul, how you doing?
You know, keep on keeping on and all that.
Excellent. And then from Japan, we have the inimitable Akira Watanabe. Hello, Akira. Welcome to Table Talks.
Hello. I'm Akira. Nice to meet you.
Akira, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Akira Watanabe. I am originally from Japan and currently I'm in Japan. And I went to college in Nebraska for musical theater. And during my OPT time, Amber got me for a round one theater job. So that's how I got here.
I like the idea that I got you. I got it. It's true.
She was a get.
It's true. I was so excited. If you're joining us for the first time, our panel will talk about the topic of the episode, obviously. But before we get into the meat of the episode, every week we take either your questions or suggestions, or we give you a little hot take on something. And today's hot take question, I really love this one, is should theaters be allowed, like regional theaters, civic theaters, and educational theaters, should they be allowed to make changes to scripts? And I was just saying this, if you guys are like regular civic theater people or education people or like students who do plays, all of you, you probably thought that this is just something that's allowed, that's like standard practice, but in reality, you're not allowed to make any changes without authorization from the rights holding organization. So do we feel like that's fair, or do we think that theaters should be allowed to make those changes without having to get authorization to them? Katie, why don't you take the first one? What do you think? What's your hot take?
No. I'm very much do what the writer wrote, but I've been in plenty of productions where we have changed things. I've been in productions where they did not do the right steps to change things. I've been in productions where they did take the time to get the authorization, which is what you should do if you really feel strongly about changing what the writer's intent was. But I don't believe that you should ever change the writer's intent because they wrote it that way for a reason. If you're uncomfortable with something in the show, you shouldn't choose that show. So pretty straightforward, no.
Yeah, there's a number of things, speaking from experience and about getting authorization, it's not hard to get the authorization from the rights holding organization. You just have to write an email. And I think the thing that a lot of people who make these cuts or changes don't know is that if you write and say, hey, we're doing this show and there's an F-bomb in it, or somebody says the B word and it's for a junior high school, maybe we shouldn't say those words. They will write back and say, hey, a lot of educational people have done this show. Here's what's made them successful. So they'll actually give you a list of stuff if you just reach out and communicate. But a lot of folks don't do it and they just make cuts. Molly, I have an interesting shade of this for you. What do you think about cuts and dance breaks? Because you're also technically not allowed to take cuts and dance breaks. What do you think about that?
Oh, that is a really interesting question that I've never really thought about before. Because I've been in shows, I feel like it was more in high school that dance breaks would have been cut, but I feel like it's pretty common for people to cut music. And I'm not sure how to get that. Sometimes as a choreographer, I have a lot to do. And if I get to cut some music, it's not the end of the world. I honestly would have to think about that a little bit more. I totally agree with Katie with everything she was saying in terms of the content of shows. And I think, what was I going to say? I thought of something and I felt like it was really good. Now it's gone. Oh my goodness. Come back to me.
I will. The thing that's interesting, I think, about the dance break question is so often in the Broadway production or in the tour production, they'll stick something in that is specifically for a specific person's skill set. Paul Regana, we talked about this, about Sutton Foster and Shrek. You remember
That's
the whole conversation? So, like, how rare is it that you find a Fiona that's also a fierce tap dancer who can sing a high C? So suddenly now you're locked into every Fiona has to sing a high C and be a fierce tap dancer. Like, so yeah, like should that be allowed? I think I kind of am of the opinion that if you have a production that doesn't have the budget to have all these location changes or whatever, that the story is still relevant, but if there's 8 bars of music for a set change that you're not doing, like
yeah.
when I did 9 to 5, there's a sequence in 9 to 5 at the end of Act 1 where they are literally in one song in 6 locations, including a parking garage, inside an automobile, the interior of a trunk, a bedroom with a garage door lift in it, and the office, like the exterior of the building. So all of those locations, and like they'll come forward and be like, I'm singing my verse, and while I do, we're tying this guy up in the office, and then we're rolling him outside. Blackout, 8 bars of music, lights come up 8 bars later, and there's a thing. So I feel like for stuff like that, obviously we didn't have the budget to do 6 locations and like all of this stuff, but I feel like we still told the story of the song really well. So if we had kept all of those 8 bars of music, where it would just be like,
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I feel like there's a difference between cutting that and like cutting the Hava Ballet and Fiddler on the Roof. Like you can cut that, you know, but you can 100% cut stuff if it's not getting in the way of the story at all.
yeah. What do you think, Akira?
I think as long as you get permission from the whoever have authority, I think it's okay, because it's just sometimes it's hard because of the budget or whatever reason. So I think it's as long as you get permission, I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key, is the permission. I think you're like dead on. And I think also what you're talking about, Molly, about the dance breaks as well, about having, like, as a choreographer, looking at all this music, which when it comes to changing material, it's my qualms come with when you are changing the author's intent or changing, you know, something about the way the authors created it. But the music for the dance breaks usually wasn't written by the authors. It was written by a special person called a dance arranger who has this particular set of skills that is creating dance breaks from existing musics. But so like in terms of cutting that, I don't feel like any composer is going to be like, no, my child, every note is one of my babies. And it is those arrangements were created, as we've said many times, for a specific production, generally the Broadway production. And we don't all have Broadway dancers, and we don't all have Broadway resources. Every production, and this is what it comes down to, is really that things like sets, like Amber mentioned, and things like dances that Molly has mentioned, are things that you don't get when you license a show. And I hear people talk about shows, for example, that they really love. I know people who really love the show Cats, and I do not particularly love the show Cats. And they say, but the dancing's so good. And my response is, no, it isn't. The dancing is not the show. Now, in that show, I mean, like, the dancing is a huge part of it, but it's different for every production. There's something like a chorus line where it's in the lyrics and there is famous choreography that is passed down. And so generally you're going to see the same thing every time. But in general, sets, dance breaks, choreography, these are not things that are part of the show. And so every production has to create their own sets, create their own dances, create their own production. So that is the only way in which I think it is permissible. In terms of language, absolutely, in an educational setting. When I was in middle school, I did a show where we changed every mention of beer to Coke and every mention of cigarettes to candy bars, it was a very different World War II musical. But yeah, when it comes to things in the script of 13, it actually describes a scene change as the set is torn apart as if by a tornado. No, it's not. That does not have to happen. That is not remotely important. I mean, it's a cool effect if you can swing it, but if you can't, you didn't not do 13 if you don't do that effect, you know? That's where I stand on that. But as a creator, stay true to the author's vision. Don't mess with that. Don't change the order of songs. Looking at you, Hands on a Hard Body, A Texas Under the Stars, back a few years ago. Oh, they changed a lot without the author's permission and invited the authors to come see it, and then got hit with a lawsuit. It was interesting.
Well, like there's the authorial intent question is something we talk about a lot. And I think it is important to talk about author's intent when we discuss whether or not something should be changed. We've had a discussion with the rights holder, like this is like years ago, about how in different regions of the country, different words hit the ear in a different way. So like in New York City, Paul will be able to tell you that hearing an F-bomb on the street is an everyday occurrence because people just scream profanity in New York, or I assume that's what happens.
That's what television would have you believe, yes.
Indeed. But in general, for an audience in New York City who's a theater going and more engaged with that community, that won't hit their ear in a very dissonant way. But in a community that's 25% Amish, like Napanee, Indiana, a word like that will stop a show. You could feel the energy of a word like that going out. You can feel it like taking people out of the story. And I kind of defer to the author of Metamorphoses. He said that the nudity that was in Metamorphoses was intrinsic to the story, and that they tried to do it in such a way because nudity always takes people out of the story. If someone is in front of you and there's nudity, because nudity in a play is one of those things, it's like that's a big deal. Sometimes you see things in movies or on TV and you're like, whatever. But in like a live theater setting, it's kind of shocking, or can be. But they wanted to do it in such a way as to recreate a classic painting, and it was intrinsic to the story that it be done. So they wanted to do it in such a way as to ease people into it so it didn't take the audience out of the story. And I have always thought about that because my line is the story worth telling? Probably. Is the thing that's going to happen going to take people out of the story? If so, you're losing the integrity of the story. Is it worth losing the integrity of the story for this shocking thing? And for me, usually the answer is no. But I'm also a person who has always sought out that permission structure when I'm allowed to do that. So I think that there's a balance that happens there. And I've had circumstances where a rights holding organization has come back and said, hey, no, you can't make these changes. So this probably is not a show for your community. If they're not going to be engaged with this story with without these changes being made, then that's probably not the right story for you to tell, which is that thing that Katie said, bringing it all around full circle. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to this question, but definitely keep your eyes out as performers. This is something, it's important. Always make sure that you are doing what's right for your own production and what's right for author's intent.
And if your production is changing things, make sure they did ask permission, because if they didn't and they get caught, your production could be in jeopardy. So just make sure they've followed the protocol and gotten authorization to do that. It's not a big deal.
No, it's easy. And if they say no, they say no, and you got to keep stuff. The problem, though, too, is in the contract, it does say that actors, performers, designers, and directors are liable for changes made by producers. So if producers are making changes and they didn't get permission, you can get in trouble as a performer. Yeah. It's crazy. Like, not that it's actually ever happened, but it is in the contract.
Which, I think also kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week about equity. Do not do not work lists.
Yes.
Why are we passing this liability onto the actors?
You
But
shouldn't be. Yeah, but actors get liability for things that they shouldn't have to be dealing with production companies and rights holders and unions. Like this is it's above their pay grade. It's above our pay grade. We're just artists. Let us make the art. That was a good hot takes, y'all. Good job. Good job, everybody. So proud. Well, moving into the meat of our episode today, we're all going to talk about our first theatrical experience, the first show we ever did, ever. And I'm very, very excited about today's episode. I've briefly discussed my first show that I've ever done, but we've never really gotten into the meat of the story of how it all happened. I think I would love to start with Miss Molly today with telling us your theater story, and maybe we'll open up to the peanut gallery for some comments.
Sure. So mine, like my first real experience, well, not real. They were both real. What am I trying? I'm like so tongue-tied this morning. But so I did play Bielka and Fiddler on the Roof at the Round Barn Theater, and I think I've told that story on Table Talks before. But before that, I was in Annie at the Elko, which is when like the Lerner and Elkhart Civic Theater were still one, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it was a long time ago, but I think I was in second grade. And I had been like in the Nutcracker Ballet as one of like the 100 child angels on stage. That was the thing I'd really done in theater. I think my parents took me to the Annie audition, and I was the youngest person in the show. I was the youngest orphan. I didn't have a speaking role or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure they had me read for Annie or like read for some of the girls within the audition. And I think for my mom, that's because she was there and she was like, I feel like I noticed at that time that you probably had some natural gifts towards acting. And she was like, because the way you were speaking, it was so natural to you. So I don't remember this at all, but yeah, I was one of the littlest orphans. I did the whole rehearsal process and I just really loved it. I think like that is really most of the story, but I always wanted to play Annie after that. It was my dream role. It still is. I never have. I never have, but it's okay.
you are playing the little redhead right now.
Yeah, that's true. I am playing Little Red Riding Hood, which is basically the same thing. I played Anne of Green Gables, also basically the same thing. Little Sally, young Violet, Violet Beauregard. I've played young, little, everything. So I covered all my bases in terms of playing kid roles. But that's my little story.
You know what's funny about it is that like your mom took you to an audition and she was like, you had a natural aptitude for the stage. And literally my story was like, I was scared, didn't want to say anything, but I knew I liked theater and I was terrible at it. Like, mine is the opposite of that. Everybody was like, oh, that Molly Hill, she is a delight. Not my story.
I don't know about that.
Oh my goodness. I think so many of us like had this experience of, oh, I'm interested in something, and then your parents take you to an audition or you do something through school or whatever it is. And like it's such an interesting thing to me to think about those initial opportunities, because your parents obviously had like they have a artistic I guess sort of they're very artistically engaged, both of your parents. So they were providing those opportunities to you, which I think is really important. And like, not everybody has to have parents who are highly involved in music and theater and all of that in order to get those opportunities. But you did have that advantage, which is so awesome. Like, I think it's really cool that your parents like wanted you to be involved in the arts in that way.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm so thankful to them for that. My mom is teaching a voice lesson downstairs as we speak, so if you hear a color to a soprano, that's what's happening in my house.
There's always background music with
That's
Molly.
Yeah. But they're the best.
That's so funny. Katie, what's your first show experience?
Well, I think it would have been probably about first grade. It was like the school Christmas show, and I was the ballerina toy. And because I was in dance classes, and my dance teacher came and choreographed us. So I got chosen to be the ballerina. So I did that. I just remember I had like a couple of solo lines, but I don't remember like everything about the story. I actually found the program. I went home to vote in August for a primary election, and I found the program going through some old boxes with my mom, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm old. But then the first one where I really like felt it was really a theater thing. Like I had done church programs and stuff throughout the years and done show choir and all that stuff. And then when I was heading into the 8th grade, our community theater finally got up and running, and we had this really great director. Her name is Paige, and she had been hired on the year before and really built our theater in town. It was beautiful, gorgeous new theater. She put a community production together that summer, and it was a musical review. And when I went to audition, I mean, I had been doing speech team and whatnot, but I'd been singing for years with show choir. I had solos and everything. I got really nervous, and my mom auditioned with me. And we like auditioned at the exact same time. We sang a duet together as our audition. It was a very informal kind of thing. And we sang Matchmaker from Fiddler. And then we both got cast, and my brother got cast, and that was the first show that we did with me and my family, essentially. And it was just nice. At first I was put in a lot of group numbers with some minor solos here or there in the group numbers. But as rehearsals started and I started to become more comfortable in the space, the director actually ended up giving me a solo song, and I did in my own little corner from Cinderella. And it was the first moment where I really thought, this is what I'm doing for the rest. Like I had always said that's what I was doing for the rest of my life, but getting done with that song that night when I got to perform it, I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna be okay.
That's so cool. So like, what do you feel like the primary things that you learned, or what's the stuff that propelled you forward from there?
Yeah. So in that process, I'll speak to why I ended up getting that solo. And it's because I finally was less nervous. I wasn't as nervous because of auditions. I was in the space. They saw my work ethic. So they saw me working nonstop. I ended up basically becoming the dance captain and helping choreograph with Paige because I had dance experience and not many people did in the cast. So I would help out with choreography or whatnot. And from then, it just kept progressing. Like then after 8th grade, I continued doing speech team and show choir and whatnot and performing in band and choir and all that. But then I started doing drama club. And from then on out, it was just plays after plays and musical after musical. And then I went to college, and then it just happened. It's what I've always wanted. Like if you ask any of my teachers from when I was younger, my 4th grade teacher will literally call me and be like, oh, it's my famous actress, dancer, and singer. Because that's what I used to say I wanted to be. I wanted to be a famous dancer, singer, and actress. And so people still remember that. And that's what I did. I mean, I'm not famous. But I am.
You're a YouTube star. What are you talking about?
Thank you. Took the words right out of my mouth.
One of these days, we're going to get one of these people to pick us up as our sponsors. We'll just look, I'm drinking Aquafina today. Maybe they'll pick us up.
Aquafina. Here, look at, Starbucks as well.
Do you think the 2008 revival of Sunday in the Park with George would be interested in sponsoring us?
I'm sure Stephen Sondheim would be interested in spots. I'll write him a letter.
You that one time, right?
Huh?
Didn't you write him a letter one time?
Yeah, twice.
You got an in.
Yeah, maybe while the next person's telling their story, I'll go grab my Sondheim letter and show it to you guys.
Well, the letter itself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in my autographed copy of his biography.
Sondheim alive?
Yes.
Yeah.
The whatever her name is, Meryl Seacrest.
That's the one.
Yeah. So Molly, same question. What do you feel like in that first show propelled you forward into your next show? Like, what's the thing that made you want to continue doing theater? What experience in your first show?
Yeah, I really related to what you said, Katie, where it was just always from that point on, I just always wanted to keep doing it. Like, it wasn't complicated. I just always knew I wanted it. And with other things, and like even other things I've still done in my life, like when I was sort of trying to figure out if I wanted to do some fitness stuff along with theater, like everything else that I've done, I've kind of had to think about for a pretty long time, like if I actually really wanted to do that thing or not. But with theater, it's just never been a question. Like, it's honestly been so simple to know that this is what I want to do. And so far, I've been able to do that because everything I've done has just led to the thing so perfectly in a way that like I could have never planned myself. So I just have total faith in that. And yeah, it's led me to everywhere I've wanted to go and has given me opportunities that I didn't even necessarily think I would have, that I have had. And I've like thought I would do certain things, or I thought like, oh, I'll probably move to New York and do that whole thing. And I'm probably not going to do that now, especially. And I'm really happy with that because I'm doing what I love. And it's always been not easy, but it's just always made sense.
It's our constant in an inconsistent world.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I know that for me, there is an element of like, it feels right. Like when something feels right, it feels like the right thing. Like when I moved to Chicago, and Paul, you might be able to relate to this from your years in Chicago.
We were neighbors, yes.
Yes, we were literally neighbors and didn't know it. There was a certain element of being in Chicago that didn't feel authentic to me. And it's not that I wasn't being myself or that I wasn't like whatever. It was just that being in Chicago was the cake and acting was the frosting. And in my life up to that point, acting had been the cake. You know, like performing had been the substantive part of what I did no matter where I was. And the frosting was wherever I was. So like, oh, I'm doing an acting job and I'm doing Shakespeare in Alaska, or like that was the frosting. Or, oh, I'm doing a show in Virginia, and the frosting is that I get to like wake up in this beautiful mountain area. Like the benefits of doing it were the other things. And for the first time in my life, the place was the substantial part of it. And it was the expectation that was enough. And then that the like having this frosting of being an actor was going to be the thing. And I didn't like cake without frosting, and I didn't like frosting without cake. So that was a big metaphor. But yeah, no, I think there is a certain element of it that's like, oh, this isn't wrong. This isn't difficult, even though it's hard. It takes tenacity and all that stuff we've talked about. It's not easy, but it feels like there's not resistance. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to put it, Molly. I think that's fascinating. Akira, what's the first show that you ever did? Tell us all about it.
I think the show was actually Hello Dolly, and that was in my freshman or sophomore year, and at the community college in Nebraska Kearney. And I was in as an ensemble member, and actually I took a college audition first, and I didn't get casted since I didn't speak English, so there is no way I can get casted. But I really wanted to be on the stage because that's why I went to America. So I was like, okay, I need some opportunity to be on the stage. So I found a community theater nearby, and I just went there, and somehow I got casted. So that's good. And that's my first show.
That's wonderful. So Akira, you knew you wanted to do theater, but even before you had ever done a show, what were the things that happened, or what was it that made you want to be an actor?
So when I was little, my mom took me to musical like play, I think, in Japan. It's all acted by female. So female dressed like a male, and female dressed like a female. So that's the show type, I think. And that was gorgeous. So I was like, okay, I want to be on the stage. I want to be a musical theater actor. And So I started learning ballet and a little bit of jazz dance. But I sing a song, but I was not good at singing then. But I really wanted to be on the stage, so I was like, I have to learn more about singing and dancing on the stage. So that's how I went to America, I think.
Yeah, I had a similar thing happen too. I knew I wanted to do theater. Like the first time I ever wanted to audition, it's because I had seen a show, and it was a community theater production of Carousel that I saw, which like that was it. I was like, okay, I'm in. Let's do this. Let's go. Whatever it takes. It's so interesting. Did you guys, like Katie, Paul, Molly, did you have an experience where you saw a show and you were like, yep, that's it?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about growing up on the old musical movies like South Pacific and whatnot. That is what propelled me into wanting to do theater. I wanted to do those movies. And I always wanted to be in Hollywood. That's where I really thought as a younger child, that's where I wanted to go. And then as I got older and discovered more musical theater, figured out that musical theater meant going to New York over LA most likely. I mean, there is theater in LA, don't get me wrong. But the prevalence is Broadway, obviously. But yeah, I think I was just remembering, I remember going to the high school one day and seeing Macbeth. They had done Macbeth. And I remember the part where she's like trying to get the spot out. And I cannot remember how old I was, but we were young. I'm sort of surprised they took us, but I loved every second of it. I was like, yes, this is where my life is. That's what I want.
I was actually in the Scottish play in my youth when I was about 13 years old, and every night I got to watch the brilliant actor who played Lady Macduff, Lady Macduff. I was playing Macduff's son, which is the scene right after the outdarn spot. So every night I got to see her brilliant performance. I learned a lot about acting in that production and in being in the professional theater. Did
you get killed on stage, Paul, or did you get killed?
Well, I got stabbed on stage. I died off stage. I don't know how like graphic I can get, but I get stabbed, and then he used the knife to throw me over his shoulder because I was a little kid, and he carried me off stage as I was like convulsing and dying. And he has killed me, mother. Flee. Yes.
I like to think that like you were just so dramatic in your death scene that they were like, can you just pick him up and take him out of there? Because it's too much.
There were two kids actually playing Macduff's son. We alternated weekends, and the other kid was a year older than me, so he couldn't get picked up. So I think the guy who played the assassin that was sent to kill us was probably more grateful when the other guy went on and he didn't have to pick up a kid and throw him over. But we had a really great relationship. I mean, specifically me and that actor, I learned a lot from him, but also like that whole cast. I'm having so much fun hearing everybody's story of how they got bit by the bug. This is really, and I think like we've touched on it lightly in previous episodes, but this is a fun trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
So my first show, and
just 1 minute, Paul. Molly, was there a show that you saw or something? Yeah, that you like that was like, oh, I want to do this.
So the weird thing is I feel like I have those experiences still all of the time. Like whenever I see a show that I think is really good, I like walk out of the theater feeling so motivated to do more theater. Like every time I see a show on Broadway, which is like that for me has almost been the hardest part of COVID, is like I can't see other theater. And like obviously I'm performing right now, but like a lot of people are upset about that. And so it's tough. Like it's really hard. Like we really are trying to make something beautiful. And so many people, and this is, now I'm getting off topic, but so many people who have come to see the show have said like going and seeing your show is the first time my life has felt normal this year. Like, I just forgot about everything for a while. And that, like, makes me almost emotional because that's why we do it. And that's how I feel every time I see a show. Like, I saw Easttown on Broadway, like, week before lockdown. And that show in particular, like, I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. And that's, like, how it has always been for me. Like, I saw a production of Camelot at a professional theater in Michigan, and it, like, just changed my mood for, like, 3 days afterwards because it was so good. Like, that's just always how it's been for me. Like, it hasn't even been just one particular show. Like, every time I see theater, that's how I feel.
It's like your anti-kryptonite.
Yeah.
It is spinach to her Popeye.
Ooh,
Absolutely.
I like that. Instead of a can, it's like a ticket. Take and rip the ticket, and you go in. Ding, 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 ding. We're old. That's the summary. All right.
I'm talking about the Robin Williams movie. What are you talking about?
Anyway, so Paul, what was your first show you ever did?
Well, first of all, when I read your email saying that this is what we were talking about, I thought you meant first professional show, and I think that would be a fun topic too.
That's
Because
like we have a plan for next week, but we could bump next week's topic to like your first professional show and how you learned that you didn't know anything.
Or save it for like down the road.
Yeah, that's true. Katie.
Whenever. I just think there are so many great stories of like, I had no idea. Yeah. So my first show ever, not counting the shows that were the very exclusive performances that I gave in my living room. Because we put on shows. They were ticketed events, and when I think when I was in third grade, I played young Patrick not Patrick Dennis, Michael Dennis in Auntie Mame, the play that the musical Mame is based on. I auditioned for Patrick. I felt so confident. Theater was in my blood. It was what I always wanted to do. My Bitten by the Bug story is the first formative memory I have as a human. It was seeing Into the Woods on TV, the original production that my parents taped onto a VHS, and being like, I have no idea what's happening, but that's all I want to do ever. So I auditioned for Patrick, and I was too young. And so they cast me as Michael. I only had one scene in the whole show, and it was at the very end of the show, but that meant I got to stay up late. So I wouldn't get home until like 10:30 at night or something, and I had school the next day, and man, doing homework backstage at this community theater production of Auntie Mame. It was a lot of fun. But I think more. Wait, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, I lied. My first show was with a company that Katie is familiar with. I was a lobster in the Lobster Quadrille in a Missoula Children's Theater production of Alice in Wonderland, of which I recently found the VHS.
Special features.
I would have to like digitize that VHS. I don't know.
You got time.
And nothing but time. So yeah, that was the first. But I think it's important how many of our that so many of our stories are things that we sought out ourselves because it was something that we wanted to do. I love what Akira said about the fact that you said you were like, and I noticed that I wasn't that good at singing. And that to me was a surprise because I knew you after you had taken the time and put the training in. I was like, no, Akira's a good singer. And in the time that I've known you, I've only known you as someone who can sing and whose singing has improved in the time that I've known you, as I've worked with you. So I love that because I know so so many people who are like, well, I'm not a dancer, and they don't do anything about it. So, there's so many things that I think we're told are just things that you can or can't do. And these are all learnable skills. So seek these opportunities out. But I also want to give a huge shout out to the people whose first shows are through some kind of educational setting, which the Missoula Children's Theater is. But I mean, people who the first time they can experience the arts or specifically theater is at school in an extracurricular or in their regular curriculum. One of my first like features was through school, and that was where I did most of my performing as a kid. And that's where I, kind of cut my teeth in a lot of theatrical traditions, and you learn so much that way. And you learn by doing the community theater or the occasional professional gig by osmosis, but having that outlet in an educational setting, I can't tell you the number of times in my life I've looked back and been so grateful that I had that readily available. I just want to give a huge shout out to that as an institution, theater education.
I love it. Like this kind of goes right into what I was going to say about my first show, Paul. So thank you for the segue, unintended. #synchronicity. So my first show was not through school because we did not have an elementary theater arts program. And I was 7 when I first wanted to start doing shows. And they had our local nonprofit arts center. It was a gallery space that had a stage with a piano and very, very small. They had like art classes, field trip opportunities, gallery shows, and they had this program where they would bring in an artist in residence in the theater arts, and they would direct a children's show during the school year. And you guys know what I do now. I think it's been very recently that I looked back on that and thought, okay, so I had this pull because I used to work full-time as a performer director, as you guys know, but now what I'm doing is running a nonprofit performing arts space full-time because I kind of made the decision that what I wanted to do was help facilitate more community arts engagement and create programming for young people to supplement the programming that doesn't exist in schools, like to supplement educational programs. And I didn't put it together until a couple weeks ago that that's how I got started, with a supplemental program from a nonprofit performing arts organization in my community. And my life would not be what my life is without someone like me creating that program when I was a kid. So the thought that my legacy actually is this, so that I can create this, so that like 30 years from now, someone else can be where I am and pass the torch again. Even though I honestly never knew the woman who created that program. The woman who ran the Fine Arts Center in my hometown is not somebody that I actually had conversations with or anything as a kid, but the ways that she affected my life in the positive really created me as the person I am today. So like, that is a shout out to nonprofit performing arts and fine arts organizations and communities, really like helping lift up the education system. So that's my shout out. My first show was Gustav the Gourmet Giant, a musical by a woman named Susan Schlafman. Brief summary: Gustav is a giant who lives in a kingdom surrounded by other kingdoms that are characterized by different kinds of food that they like to make. So it's a food-based culture. And the gourmet giant is a bit of a foodie, and he takes over, he attacks and invades different countries so that he can eat all of their resources. So I came from a candy kingdom. That's my character, came from a candy kingdom, and I was a cherry. We were all about desserts and candies. So I was Princess Cherry, obviously princess. And some of the other kingdoms were like French food. There was one, oh my gosh, there was one that they said they're from Japan. And the lyric Akira is, I come from Japan, try my mugu gai pan. That is so wrong in like on a Mugu Gai Pan is not Japanese. Like, this is some woman in North Dakota in the 1980s writing this musical. She's like, how do I rhyme this? So
yes, a few things and an "and."
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But yes, there were all of these different kinds of food, and the giant would take over all of the different kinds of food. The thing that I learned from doing the show, because I'd already had that experience of seeing community theater, like shout out to civic theater organizations as some of the first places that we see theater as kids. I had already seen that show. I already sort of knew that I wanted to be a part of it. I'd done church shows. Katie and I were sort of talking about this at the beginning before we started recording. Like, I'd done stuff. I'd sung solos. I was in choir or whatever, but I really knew that I wanted to do theater. And this was that first opportunity. And I really learned what goes into putting on a show, that nothing is magic, that nothing just appears and you get to do it. Because I also, at 7 as Princess Cherry, they had me in this fabric sack that had elastic on the top, and it was a red fabric tube and had elastic on the bottom and 2 armholes, and we stuffed it with newspaper. But my elastic on the bottom kept breaking because obviously I was dancing up a storm. So I would kick, and they didn't stitch it shut. They safety pinned it. And my first time ever making my own costume or repairing my own costume was at the age of 7. When I threaded with a safety pin my own elastic through my costume and I stitched it myself. Like, yeah, so it's in my blood. All of like every experience I've ever had and everything that has ever happened all came from Princess Cherry, Gustav the Gourmet Giant. But yeah, that was my first experience. I think like the summary of all of this is that without community organizations, without arts education, without professional theater and professional actors, and without fine arts nonprofits, none of us would be where we are. The idea that the arts are this extracurricular fun thing that it's fine, don't worry about it, like it's going to happen naturally. Like, I heard a disturbing statistic this week that the Arts Education Association last year received like $6 million in donations total, which sounds great. But the Science Education organization last year received $4 billion in donations. So it's not that science is not a valid place. However, the arts also have a validity that is not really being respected in the same way that like the STEM fields are being respected. So think of that what you will. None of us would be who we are, where we are, creative people contributing to our communities the way we are without those organizations. Katie.
I was just going to say real fast that, you know, in comparison, if you look at educational purposes, look at what your athletics are getting compared to what your arts educations are getting. They should be even, period. Because band, choir, acting, they give you life skills. Being on a team for a sport also gives you life skills, gives you team building skills, gives you teamwork skills, gives you dedication, gives you all those things. But so do these arts programs. They deserve your funding. So write your people, make sure they're funding you, y'all.
And you guys as students have a lot of power too. If you're our drama club members and you're tuning into Table Talk from Drama Club, you guys have a lot of power. One letter from you to your teacher, to your principal, or to your school and arts administration organization, even your PTA, it's going to go a long way to let them know that the arts are important to you guys. And we know they are. We know they are. We have hung out with you guys. We know like how important this stuff is. Paul, what were you going to say?
No, just that even if you are of a mind that the STEM subjects are more I don't want to say more important, but have a greater need for emphasis right now or in general. It can't be argued that it is 1,000 times more important when that is the so just to say, I know that there are people who will hear that disparity and think, well, yes, but one is the arts, which is fine and important, and the other is STEM, which builds rockets that go to Mars, or whatever.
Space Force.
Right, right. And STEM is absolutely important, but yeah, not more than 1,000 times important than the arts.
But
Just
the thing too that I think is, and everybody that was involved with Drama Club this summer, instructors and people who helped design this curriculum, we know that our aim in teaching fine arts and our aim in teaching theater and dance and music was not just here's theater and dance and music. The last 2 episodes that we've had of Table Talks have been all about secondary learning objectives and things that you learn from being a drama kid. But that's just scratching the surface. Think about in our theater history lesson, how much children might have learned about other parts of history from learning about theater history, or in our design lessons, learning about the principles of light waves versus particles. Like, we're talking about physics in an artistic setting. Do you think that telling a child the concept of light particles versus light waves, just as a concept, is more productive than teaching it to them through how light colors combine in a theatrical setting to create different colors in the way that it actually works in a practical way? Like, that practical and artistic creative thing is a way we learn things. And every scientist is a creative artist. Everyone. Every single one. Friend of mine who is a scientist taught monkeys to play video games. You think that... Yeah, like as a way to build better prosthetic limbs. You think no creativity went into that project?
I hope that there were cameras involved in that project. I will say that.
I can even tell you about the game. The game was like, they had a big circle in the middle of the screen, and it was the monkey's job to move a cursor to the middle of the circle. And when they did that, they got applesauce.
Okay, it wasn't like monkeys playing Pong.
I mean, it kind of, like, as time went on, the circle they were moving into got smaller and smaller, and the cursor size got smaller and smaller, so it was more refined. And they had them sitting in a chair where it was just the arm. So it was only like they were recording what was happening in the brain while the arm was moving, so that they might be able to see what was happening in the brain, so that they could build a prosthetic limb where you could sense where it is,
Right,
without looking at it, because that's called proprioception. And proprioception in prosthetic limbs is one of the biggest, like, unsolved problems because people don't know where they are. So that's the aim of the research.
Science.
See? But that was an incredibly creative project, and they had to come up with an artistic concept for a video game that a monkey could play. Someone had the idea to teach a monkey to play a video game, and that's like, that sounds like a concepted production of Two Gentlemen of Verona to me. Like... Someone came up with something crazy. So yeah, it's all connected. The idea that the arts don't deserve as much fundraising because they're only people doing cats. It's not what it is. So
Not to mention, like, kids who are in the arts, especially if you have musical abilities, your math skills are usually better than the average student. Your reading skills go up a lot, your comprehension of what you're reading, your public speaking, all those things. The arts inform that education, and it gives them a practicum to use those skills. So it's really informing the STEM portion of education with arts. So fun to start arts.
Yeah, we got on a little bit of a tangent there, but I love it.
It's my bad, guys.
Table Talks. Oh my goodness. Well, what do we think about next week? Next week's episode 20.
I think it could be fun to do our first professional show.
I think so too. We had a plan, you guys. We had a plan for next week, but I think next week we are going to talk about maybe our first big professional gig. Does that sound fun to everybody?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Any closing thoughts from anybody? Miss Molly?
Oh my goodness. I just like really enjoyed this whole like theater education conversation and kind of being a fly on the wall listening. But yeah, theater arts are awesome. I like not to like brag, but like I was a really good student all throughout high school and college, and not that you have to be a theater person, but I think because I was a theater person, that's why I got like a 4.0, and that's why I like my grades and like other academics were as great as they could be because I had purpose doing something. So like everything felt like it had purpose, even if it wasn't like for what I did, because I had that purpose. It just everything, it helped everything make sense. So I don't know, my 2 cents.
Yeah, but like as an actor, learning everything you can about everything you can learn about is advantageous. You think the actors who were booked on Silent Sky originally didn't know anything about science? Of course they did. So,
Right, exactly.
yeah, you never know. You never know. Miss Katie, final thoughts?
You know, that little side note from Molly just made me think, you know, we always joke that I'm not a doctor, but I can play one on TV kind of situation. And I think that is part of the draw for me, is like exploring all these different avenues of life through someone else. And just getting a little window into someone else's life. I don't know. But yeah, love theater. It's my life. Yay.
Perfect. Akira, thank you for joining us today. Any final thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, as Katie said, my favorite show is Chicago because I can kill people in the show and I don't get caught. So that's great experience. I love the theater too.
I love that. Yeah, sometimes you get to play bad people. Some of my most wonderful experiences on stage have been playing terrible human beings, particularly terrible human beings who like shoes. That's how it goes. Paul, final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to echo everything that's been said. I love the fact that doing a new show and a new role. I mean, I'm not doing roles that much anymore, but doing new shows makes me want to learn more about different things. And I think I've always wanted to sort of be that Renaissance person. And the more you do art, the more you learn about other things. And I love what Miss Molly said about walking out of a theater inspired. I never, even when I see a terrible show, I walk out going, I have to make the theater world better. This has been a really fun one, exploring like what makes us tick theatrically.
Yeah, I agree. This has been great. Well, thank you all for tuning in this week. I know that this has been sort of like an episode of reminiscing for us, but I hope that you guys all got out of it as much as we got out of chatting about it today. Make sure that you join us next week. I think it'll be an even more enlightening and possibly even have some humor next week, talking about our first professional gigs. As always, thank you, Goshen Noon Kiwanis. The Goshen Theater Drama Club would not be anywhere close to possible without your support, and we love you guys. Thank you, Drama Club members, for tuning in today. If you guys have any questions or comments, anything, you could pop that in here on YouTube, or you can reach us on Facebook. Absolutely, let us know your questions. If you had any questions about our first show, or you want to tell us your first show story, maybe we'll share that next week. That'd be great to hear from you guys. Also, Paul, I know you're not one of our regular panelists.
Sure.
Deep breath. Prepare yourself. But do you maybe want to join us next week? Tell us about your first professional job.
Same time next week?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be cleaning my oven, but I think I can probably move that, and then I can do it. Yeah.
Okay. Great. I mean, appliance maintenance is very important. It goes engagement with the arts, appliance maintenance,
STEM.
health,
Oh,
family. Yeah, the usual.
sure.
Well, that'd be great. That'd be great if you could join us. Akira, we'd love to have you back as well. Do you want to join us next week?
Yeah, sure.
That sounds great. You can tell us all about your first professional experience from your perspective, because I was there. So we could get like the behind the scenes look at Akira's first professional job. And Molly, I think I was at yours too.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think I was at Katie's. No, and I wasn't at Paul's for sure. As far as we know.
What? You were the one that hired me for a theater that I'd been trying to get into for a while at that point. So yeah.
Yeah, it was something. Yeah.
I don't know if you caught Unicorn City when you were living in Chicago. We were playing at the Apollo Theater.
No. I
In the
did
basement.
not. Oh, in the basement of the Apollo. Whoo, my
You
oh
know
my.
the performance space down there?
Yeah, no, I thought that was like a coat check. And on that note, thank you for joining us today. Tune in next week for our stories, our tales of our first professional jobs ever. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.